At the Sapphire meeting, my boss passed me over for his nephew, the room stunned. A horrifying secret revealed. 10 years. That was the price I paid. 10 years I dedicated to transforming Sapphire Logistics' European supply chain into a perfect machine, a continuous flow from the port of Rotterdam all the way to the Polish border. I stood in the boardroom, illuminated by the cold neon lights, my heart pounding. Today, the position of Regional Operations Director had to be mine. It wasn't just recognition. It was the first step in a long-held plan. But Henri Leclerc's voice, deep and authoritative, shattered that illusion. "And our new Regional Operations Director," he announced, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on a younger, inexperienced face, "will be Theo Leclerc." The air thickened. Whispers died down. I could feel the sympathetic glances falling on me. Theo Henry's nephew, a young man with zero experience. I lowered my head, forcing a smile that I knew looked painfully fake. "Congratulations, Theo." My voice rang out, shockingly clear and composed. Under the table, my hands clenched into fists, fingernails digging deep into my flesh, anger swirling like a storm. But it wasn't the anger of disappointment. It was triumph. The bait had been taken. Henri called me into his private office, the scent of leather and expensive cigars assaulting my nostrils. He sat behind his massive wooden desk, his smugness unconcealed. "You are the best, Annalise," he began, his tone condescending. "But you understand. Family legacy is a priority. I need you to mentor Theo." I merely nodded, keeping my voice level. "I understand, Mr. Leclerc." I understood better than he thought. 10 years ago, in this very building, Henri Leclerc told me my father, Pierre Dubois, died in a tragic accident at the port. A lie. Henri had eliminated him. He had uncovered the smuggling network Sapphire's dark heart, and he had died for it. Lila, my best friend, an investigative journalist always brimming with passion, was waiting in the hallway. She grabbed my arm, indignant. "Henry is so unfair. He can't do this to you." I shook my head, playing the role of a tired single mother. "I still have Julian to worry about," I whispered, referring to my 10-year-old son. "I just want him to have a stable life." Julian was my only light, and to protect his future, I had to plunge Sapphire into darkness. Hours later, an email popped up on my screen. A shy subordinate had sent me an audio file. I put on my headphones. Henri's voice resonated, cold and arrogant, speaking to Genevieve Moreau. "Annalise will be docile. She needs the job to support her child. She won't dare to do anything." I took off my headphones, took a deep breath. I let tears stream down my cheeks. I played the role of a wounded woman, backed into a corner, perfectly. But when the office door closed, when I was alone in the twilight, the tears dried instantly. I didn't wipe them away. I lifted my head, looking at my reflection on the turned-off computer screen. The promotion was never the goal. It was just the spark. The real plan was much bigger. I wasn't here to climb a ladder. I was here to collapse the entire ladder, then build an empire of my own from the ashes. And Henry, with his arrogance, had just handed me the perfect weapon to do it, his nephew. I allowed myself to smile. A cold smile, devoid of warmth. The smile of someone who had waited 10 years for revenge. I submitted my resignation. It was a calculated move, a tremor to make the prey panic and become careless. As expected, Henri lost his composure. "You leave Sapphire, and I will destroy your reputation in this industry," he roared in the boardroom, his threat barely concealing his panic. I met his fury with silence. "I'll stay for 2 weeks," I said, my voice even, to transition my work to Theo. He thought it was submission. He didn't know that I had just given myself 2 precious weeks to plant mines at the very foundations of his empire. Every training session with Theo was an elaborately staged play. I buried him in complex but harmless operational knowledge, such as secondary vessel schedules or tertiary port procedures. Meanwhile, the core financial reports of the Eastern European shipping route, the dark heart of the smuggling network that cost my father his life, were perfectly concealed by me. His arrogance grew with each of my feigned compliments. "You're a quick learner, Theo." He believed he was on the verge of mastering the world, unaware that it was merely a cage I had constructed. He was the perfect pawn, a tool I would use to destroy the very person who created it. At night, when the Sapphire building was nothing but a silent block, I transformed into another person. I was no longer the dedicated mentor. I was a ghost, a programmer of downfall. My fingers glided over the keyboard, planting malware into the heart of the logistics system. a dormant algorithm that would only awaken when a large shipment was canceled. At that point, it would automatically cripple the entire smuggling route my father had once discovered. The password to lock it was the date of my father's death. But one-time bomb wasn't enough. I needed an entire minefield. My plan moved to its second phase, destroying Sapphire from the outside. I began arranging private meetings with major clients, not in the office but in luxurious restaurants, where trust was easily built. I played the role of a colleague forced to leave with regret, sowing seeds of doubt. Family pressure made me resign, I said, my voice full of empathy. But Sapphire is undergoing major changes. You should be careful. Then I discreetly mentioned David Jensen and his company, Silverlinks Energy, an emerging competitor. They seem like a safer option at this time, I suggested, as if merely offering sincere advice. They didn't know that David Jensen was not just Henri's competitor. He was also my ally. My phone rang. It was Lila, her voice always tense when she smelled news. Annalise, there are rumors Sapphire is being investigated for smuggling, but there's a lack of evidence. Do you know anything? I just want to leave peacefully, I replied, a perfect lie to keep her safe and out of the fight. I couldn't let her get caught in this dangerous spiral, but I could use her enthusiasm. I steered Lila in another direction, but keep an eye on Genevieve Moreau. I think she and Henri seem very shady. Genevieve was an ambitious shark, and I knew she wouldn't sit still if Sapphire wavered. Lila tracking her would create a perfect smokescreen, concealing my true tracks and those of my ally, David Jensen. That night, in my darkened apartment, after Julian was fast asleep, I opened the old safe hidden behind my father's painting. His diary lay there, its yellowed pages carrying the breath of the past. I reread the last lines, trembling and desperate. Henri seems to want to eliminate me because I know about Sapphire's smuggling network. Pain constricted in my chest, not weakness, but icy fury. 10 years ago, I was just a young girl, heartbroken and helpless. Now, I held Henri's fate in my hands. I wouldn't just expose him. I would make him, through his own arrogance and misguided decisions, destroy his so-called family legacy, the very thing he killed my father to protect. 6 months earlier, this chess game had begun long before Henri announced the promotion decision. I sat in my office, drafting a fake report on Theo's internship performance. I didn't disparage him. On the contrary, I transformed his inexperience into breakthrough talent and bold thinking. I even deliberately created a minor problem at the port of Hamburg, an incident for which I had secretly arranged all solutions, then thrust Theo into it. He solved it perfectly, of course, exactly according to the script I had laid out. Henri had read that report, his eyes gleaming with pride. He saw in his nephew a worthy successor. He was completely convinced that placing Theo in a position of power was a wise decision by a farsighted leader. He didn't know that, from that moment on, he had placed the most important chess piece into the hands of his enemy. My goal was never promotion. It was never the position of operations director. My goal was revenge for my father, the man Henri Leclerc had murdered simply for daring to expose Sapphire's criminal network. And the public humiliation in the boardroom today was not a failure. It was the opening shot for his downfall. The click of a major client's contract cancellation, which I had seeded with doubt, was the spark. Immediately, from my apartment, through a secure access portal, I watched the code I had embedded in the system awaken. Ciao Sinsuit. A multi-million-dollar container shipment suddenly vanished from the tracking system at the transit hub in Latvia, the heart of the smuggling network. The Eastern European shipping route, Sapphire's secret lifeline, was completely paralyzed. Theo, with the smugness of an amateur, fell straight into the trap. Instead of investigating, he hastily ordered the rerouting of the entire shipment, a disastrous miscalculation based on the superficial knowledge I had taught him. The result was a domino effect. Numerous ships stranded in ports, a broken supply chain, and Sapphire plunged deep into crisis. He was fighting fire with gasoline. My phone began ringing incessantly. Major clients, those I had warned, simultaneously withdrew. $1 million contracts were canceled within hours. Henri's empire was collapsing from within, faster than I had even anticipated. The board convened an emergency meeting. I was summoned as a consultant, a deliciously ironic twist. In the suffocating room where panic reigned, Genevieve Moreau, with eyes sharp as knives, pointed directly at me. "It's Annalise. She's behind all of this." I lifted my head, facing the accusation without flinching. I let silence envelop the room before speaking, my voice calm, tinged with a hint of regret. "I left 2 weeks ago, Genevieve. The problem here isn't me." I paused, my gaze sweeping over a trembling Theo, then looking directly at Henry. "It's Theo. He lacks experience. We all saw it." My words were like a dagger. They not only shifted all responsibility onto Theo, but also subtly accused Henri of his appointment decision. Everyone's eyes turned to the Leclerc uncle and nephew. I had made them the focal point of failure, and myself a falsely accused victim. The play had unfolded perfectly. Henri, his face ashen like a corpse, pulled me into the hallway after the meeting. His arrogance had vanished, replaced by desperation. "I hear you're going to Silverlinks," he hissed, his voice full of hatred. "I'll sue you into bankruptcy." That's when I delivered the finishing blow. That very evening, I sent Lila an anonymous email. Inside was everything I had collected over the past 10 years. Forged contracts, suspicious transactions to shell companies, irrefutable evidence of Henri's smuggling network. "Exclusive source," I wrote briefly. "Do the right thing." Hours later, the scandal erupted. It wasn't just news, it was a firestorm. Sapphire Logistics, a front for a criminal empire, the headline blazed across newspapers. The public turned its back. Investors fled. The towering Sapphire building in Rotterdam was now nothing short of a tomb. Henri was ruined. Not by an adversary, but by the very woman he had scorned and trampled. That night, Lila came to my apartment. She was no longer a journalist exulting in a scoop, but a friend trying to piece together incongruous fragments. "Annalise, I don't understand," she said, her voice filled with confusion. "This evidence, it's too detailed, too perfect. When did you get it?" I poured her a glass of wine, then looked her straight in the eye. It was time to reveal part of the truth. "David Jensen?" I said, his name sounding softly. "The director of Silverlinks. He's not a businessman. He's an Interpol agent." Lila froze. The glass of wine in her hand arrested midair. "Silverlinks is just a front," I continued. 3 years ago, I contacted him. I provided him with initial data about Henri's network, enough for Interpol to launch an undercover investigation. Everything that happened today was part of a plan to destroy Sapphire at its roots and clean up this logistics industry. The shock on Lila's face morphed into astonishment, then admiration. You're a spy?" she whispered, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. I took a sip of wine, a smile on my face that this time was no longer cold. "Not a spy, Lila," I said. "Just justice." Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, a final desperate act was unfolding, completing my picture in an unexpected way. Theo, in extreme panic as he saw his world collapsing around him, tried to salvage the situation. He accessed my old system, searching for anything that could help him understand what had happened. He found a heavily encrypted piece of data, something he naively thought was the core operational document I had hidden. Hoping to find answers, he saved that piece of data to his personal laptop. Theo couldn't know. He couldn't understand that what he had just taken was not an operational document. It was the final key. It was a detailed map of the entire smuggling network, and he had just made himself the carrier of the most crucial evidence in the case. The final move was not made by me, but by Theo. Desperate to salvage Sapphire, he did exactly what I predicted an amateur would do. Transferred the encrypted data fragment from his personal laptop to an external server for analysis. That action immediately activated the final command code I had pre-installed. I had anticipated his panic, and I knew he would seek what he thought was the key. In an instant, all evidence of Sapphire's smuggling network, every forged invoice, every secret route, every suspicious transaction was automatically decrypted and sent directly from the company's server to an anonymous Interpol IP address. Theo, whom I had once considered the most inexperienced pawn, completed my plan without even knowing it. He had personally handed over all the evidence. In that moment, I admit, there was a fleeting surprise. He was even more useful than I had expected. Everything that followed happened in a whirlwind. Henri was arrested at Rotterdam airport while attempting to flee. I watched the news report, seeing his hands cuffed behind his back, his desperate eyes as federal agents led him away. He was charged with smuggling, money laundering, and operating a criminal organization. The Sapphire Empire went bankrupt within a week, and Silverlinks, with a swift contract, acquired all its remaining assets, exactly as per my agreement with David Jensen. I stood in my new office, on the top floor of the Silverlinks building, looking down at the port of Rotterdam. Now, I was the regional operations director for Europe, but that was just a superficial title. My true power extended far beyond that, a hidden power that the entire logistics industry would soon feel. A year passed. Teo sought me out at an abandoned warehouse by the port. He had changed. Gone was his former smugness, replaced by the gauntness and humility of someone who had undergone a major upheaval. He said he was working for an NGO against smuggling in Brussels. He bowed his head, an act that the Theo of a year ago would never have done. "Miss Annalise, I was wrong to be so arrogant," he said, his voice sincere. "I want to learn from you, so I can atone for my mistakes." I looked at him, my eyes unreadable. He was still too naive. But that naivete, if guided correctly, could become a useful tool. I took out a USB drive from my jacket pocket. "This industry is brutal, Teo," I said, my voice cold. "Use this to survive." I handed him the USB drive. He took it like a treasure, an act of forgiveness, unaware that he was about to step into a new, much larger game. He didn't know. He couldn't understand that the USB drive didn't contain evidence of old smugglers. It contained the contact list of the new smuggling network I had built a more efficient, sophisticated empire, replacing Henri's clumsy one. The truth I never told anyone, not even Lila or David Jensen, was that my father didn't just discover that network. He was once a key link in it. Henri betrayed and eliminated him simply to monopolize all the profits. I wasn't seeking pure justice. I came to claim my father's legacy. I destroyed Sapphire not to eradicate crime, but to build my own underground empire, with Silverlinks as the perfect front to secure my son Julian's future. Teo, with his eager desire for atonement, was completely unsuspecting. He became a new pawn in my game, carrying the USB drive without knowing the truth. He would help me clean up minor competitors, thinking he was doing the right thing. I returned to my apartment. Julian was fast asleep. I held him close, feeling his warmth, the only true thing in my world. I reopened my father's diary, silently rereading the last lines I had written in it. "Father Pierre, I made Henri pay, but I chose to walk your path, in my own way." I put the diary down, looking at the family photo on the table. A complex feeling surged, the satisfaction of justice mingled with the sweet taste of power. Late that night, my phone lit up. A message from an unknown number. "Queen, your empire will be challenged." I smiled coldly, a smile that only the darkness could witness. I whispered into the quiet stillness of the room. Diamonds only truly shine in the dark. Outside the window, the port of Rotterdam glowed like an endless network of lights. Container ships, steel giants, moved silently, carrying my secrets and goods across the world. I stood on the dock, the cold sea wind blowing through my black coat. The vast expanse before me was not just a port. It was my chessboard, a diamond network I had built, impregnable. A tugboat sounded a long horn and slowly departed, carrying the first shipment under the operation of the new empire. My voice resonated, blending with the wind and the waves. "This is not the end. This is the beginning.